Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Not too much to discuss as far as any situations at the club. I'm recording this a little bit earlier in the week than I normally do. So if anything happens this week, I'll just carry it over for the next episode. But I will say this. The last tournament we finished up last week. It was round 5 of 5, and we had 38 players. I mean, those are some serious numbers. 38 players, call it almost 40. I mean, that's almost like a Marshall Chess Club type of turnout as far as an event during the week. But yeah, 38 players. It was really cool. Some good chess, a lot of games, and I'm pretty happy about that. And as I discussed last week, because I was talking about starting a chess club and how to build it up because a number of mailbag questions had to do with that. This is after many years. You know, it's not like we started and within a week we had 38 players, but it's really great that now we're averaging between 30 and 40 per tournament. Sometimes we've had more than 40. So that being said, let's jump right into the listener mailbag. A reminder, the mailbag is open. I do want to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, episode suggestions, you can email me directly, info@thechessangle.com. You can also go on our website and fill out the contact form there. You can also leave a voice message on the website too, which is kind of cool. We had a few of those. Those are always nice. And this week, it's interesting. Most of the messages are more comments and thoughts on things I've discussed, which is great. I like to hear your point of view. The mailbag is a big part of the show. Our first message is from Rick, big fan of the show, friend of the pod. He's written in a number of times before. We appreciate it, Rick. And he wrote 3 separate comments. So I guess I'll read each one individually and then comment separately as we go. And this was his first comment. He says, I have found a solution to my last question on how to work on learning on opening repertoire. I can set and forget, as you say. I am studying the London and Dutch with books and going on lead chess and playing anonymously. Rapid 10 or 15-minute games. I can save and analyze. If it's noteworthy, it's working. Well, good. I'm glad it's working. I mean, the idea of kind of studying in books and then playing your games online and then analyzing them, that's great. I'm glad it's working for you. But you made the most important point there at the end. When you play your games online, you have to analyze them. That's where the learning is going to come in, because as I've said many times before, a lot of people just play these 3-minute games or whatever, or 5-minute games, but they just do it over and over and over, and they don't really analyze. And for a lot of people, they're not going to learn that way and grow. So that's very cool. Second thing, he says, sorry for the strong disagreement on this one. Okay, so what he's referring to here, we had an email, I think the listener's name was Michael. It was about how he plays these sort of games for fun, like these sort of sloppy or junk games, like these mess around games. And he also plays serious games. And the listener who wrote in, he felt that by doing both, that it didn't hurt his game and it actually helped in a lot of ways. I think that's true for some people. For some, it's not. I think it's really personal preference. But as far as having those sort of sloppy games, Rick says he disagrees on this. I, like many others, play periodic fiddle-faddle games or quote-unquote mess-around chess, usually on my phone. This is very different from real games, either OTB or structured league online classic games. For me, the more I mess around, the worse it is for both these games and my overall chess play in all games. As Noel Studer says, quality and focus really matter. You can't flip a switch and turn them on and off, at least I can't. So for me, I need to lay off the super casual, quote unquote, pass the time phone chess in order to improve. Well, Rick, I agree with you there. I think I said that in the mailbag episode. For me, I have to take it extremely seriously or not play at all. That's just my whole Headspace, my whole ecosystem. A lot of players agree, but a lot of players agree with Michael, who had written in saying that he does both. It really depends. If you're doing sort of that mess around chess on your phone, whatever you want to do, like some people have like a serious account and then a fun account, quote unquote, and it works for them, that's fine, then do it. Other people like me and you, Rick, and many others, they need to always be in a serious state of mind when they play because it can affect their overall game. So I agree with you, but I really think it's personal preference because I do know a lot of stronger amateur players who do both. They play those mess around games, like you said, and serious games, and it's not hurting their OTB classical rating. Other people like myself, it will. Like I pretty much removed, not pretty much, I did remove all chess apps from my phone. I don't really do it anymore. I don't even do study material on my phone anymore because I just feel like it's just not the same. I do it on my desktop with the big screen. I don't really play much online anymore, but if I do and when I study, I'm always very serious in that state of mind. If I'm really exhausted or if my mind isn't there, I just won't bother because then for me, I try to force it and then I get frustrated and I'm like, why did I do this? I'm disgracing the game. But again, for other people, those sort of mess around games where they can just kind of let off steam after work and they're not too concerned about results, they enjoy it and it doesn't hurt their chess. And in some cases, it could help them because they can mess around with openings. It's really personal preference. But I agree with you, Rick, that for me, those sort of mess around games don't really work. But again, to each his own. His third comment was about weekend tournaments. He says, again, I envy those who don't travel for business on a regular basis and can have a steady diet of club play. I have little choice but weekend events if I want to be able to get any volume of OTB. I get your critiques of the weekend events, but with no choice, I try to make the best of it with mostly one-day events and then use strategic buys to make the schedule less crazy. Well, Rick, I totally understand. Not everyone is in a situation for whatever reason. Everyone's schedule, everyone's work, everyone's life is different. Not everyone is going to be in a situation where they can play a weekly club game. Or if, some people can't even play during the week at all, I get it. And weekend tournaments are all that's available. In some cases, many people don't even have a local chess club that they can go to. So I completely understand. But I like what you said about using strategic buys. I've spoken about that on the pod. It was a while since I mentioned it, but I agree with you completely. You can take buys simply to take a break. You're not violating the rule. Some people think like, well, you can only take a buy because you legitimately can't make it. No, you can request a buy strategically because you want to break between rounds. But the problem is some people, it's this sunk cost thing they get into where, well, I paid the tournament fee, I paid for the hotel, I want to play every game, I want to get my money's worth, but you have to weigh that against your performance. So let's say it's 5 rounds in a weekend. Are you better off taking 2 buys and playing really well for those 3 games? Maybe your rating goes up a bit. Or are you better off playing all 5 games because, well, I paid for it, but then you play poorly and lose rating points. So it's a little bit of a trade-off, but I agree with you completely about using strategic buys if weekend tournaments are your only choice because of your schedule. So Rick, thanks as always for chiming in. Keep them coming. Really appreciate it. Our next message is from Tim, who's also written us before, friend of the pod. How you doing, Tim? He says, to get better at tactics, I have mostly been using chess.com puzzles. In the last few months, I haven't been able to do them or haven't taken the time to do them. Before this, my peak puzzle rating was about 2930, which I remember was hard to get to. After a few months, I have been doing these puzzles on chess.com again, and I noticed a big difference. All of a sudden, they seemed a lot easier to do, and I was able to get my low current puzzle rating from 2300 all the way back to 2900 in a single week. That's when I got suspicious. Was it always this easy? Have I just improved a ton over the last few months? I checked the rating of the puzzles that I did, and I noticed that even though my puzzle rating was 2900, all the puzzles that I did were below 2000. That surprised me. How can you give only 2000 rated puzzles to a 2900 rated player? I then noticed that there was the option to set the puzzles to hard or easy, which I never noticed before. I tried putting this setting on hard mode, but this didn't change anything. The puzzles they gave me kept being below 2000, and also this setting seemed to reset after a while back to standard. I then tried emailing chess.com about this, but was surprised to see that you can no longer email them. Apparently, they just give you a chatbot these days, which directs you to an FAQ. I was wondering if you have also noticed this on chess.com and what your take on all this is. I also thought this might be an interesting topic to discuss on the podcast, so that's why I sent this in. Thank you for the great content, and I hope you win your next game. Tim from the Netherlands. Well, thanks, Tim, for chiming in. I've heard this before. I'm going to tell you what I've heard. I'm not really qualified to speak about this. I'm not really a puzzle person on chess.com. Like, I like their lessons when you go to learn and then lessons. I think those are really good. That's some of the best stuff online. I'm not really a crunch, 20 puzzles a day type of person, but I will say this. I sort of did a little cursory research on this. You're not the only one who feels this way. Now, I'm not giving an opinion on this. I'm not going to give my own personal opinion because, like I said, I really don't use them. But I've been hearing this lately where people are claiming that the puzzles on chess.com are getting easier. Now, before I talk more about it, what I'll do, Tim, and for anyone else who's interested, someone actually posted a Reddit thread on this. The name of the thread is, did chess.com recently make puzzles easier, or did I just crack chess? And a lot of people chimed in. I mean, I didn't read every comment, but just giving it a glance, a lot of people chimed in that they agreed with the original poster, that the chess.com puzzles do seem easier. So again, I'll link that Reddit post in the show notes if anybody wants to check it out. Other people do feel that way. Some are claiming that they just want to give people a greater sense of accomplishment because, then they'll get more people on the site. Like I said, I'm not saying that's true. These are just things that I'm hearing. I'm just reporting what I'm hearing. And I know that the option to set the puzzles to hard or easy is there, but like you, other people said they did that and it didn't change much. So all I will say on it, Tim, is that you're not the only one who is making this claim. All right. And like I said, you may want to check out that article. Another thing I'm hearing, a lot of people swear by the puzzles on Lichess. Now, I don't want to get into a whole Lichess versus chess.com thing. That's a separate rabbit hole. But from what I'm hearing, the puzzles on Lichess resemble regular games, a lot of them, as opposed to these sort of compositions. I'm hearing good things about the puzzles on Lichess. I mean, a lot of people also do like the puzzles on chess.com. It's personal preference. I guess I would say this, if the chess.com puzzles aren't doing it for you, maybe check out the puzzles on Lichess because I'm hearing some good things about them. I want to check those out myself at some point. So I guess that's everything I can share with you on that, Tim. But again, you're not alone in that opinion. And I appreciate you chiming in. Thanks so much, Tim. All right, this is Neil here. We interrupt this pre-recorded podcast for an update. So after I recorded this, because I did it early in the week, as I said, on October 9th of 2025, chess.com came out with an article entitled New Puzzles Rating, Difficulty Settings, and More Consistent Experience, where they claim they fixed this rating issue with the puzzles. It's a whole article. I will, of course, link it up in the show notes. You can check it out. You can decide for yourself whether that's true, whether they did correct the puzzles. It's supposed to be a much better experience. Apparently, chess.com was aware that many were not happy with the puzzle rating and the level of difficulty and all that stuff. So, again, this episode is being released on Sunday, October 12th, 2025, and this article dropped 3 days before that. Okay. Again, it's linked up. You can check it out. But I just wanted to add this addendum because I caught it as I was editing this episode. And then rather than have to kind of include it next week, I was able to sneak it in the same episode. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear some feedback on this. And now back to our regularly pre-recorded podcast. Our final message is from Marty. He says, "Hi, Neil. This is going to be a bit long, but I wanted to write about a few topics that have come up in the past few episodes. The pauses and restarts posed no issues for me. Your fantastic content more than makes up for these things, and I would rather have you save time by not being overly concerned about having a flawless approach to your recording and editing. The content and unique style is what sets you apart, and I want you to continue producing this awesome podcast despite your busy life." Well, thanks, Marty. That's really nice. I appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear it, because there's definitely going to be times where I sort of need to record at the 11th hour, or I can't quite edit and clean it up as much as I want to. So I appreciate that. And yeah, the goal is to keep this going, definitely, for sure. I mean, I stopped the video portion of it because that was just way too much. I won't go down that sort of tangent now. I'll speak about that another time as sort of my content creation things. But right now, yeah, I'm pretty much all in on the podcast. But I'm kind of glad I messed around with some of the video stuff just to kind of get it out of my system. But I appreciate that, Marty. So it's good to know. And I heard a few similar comments where people were like, listen, we appreciate it. Don't worry about it. So that really means a lot. Thank you, Marty. I appreciate that. So his next point, he says, "I believe a prior emailer from the Netherlands asked about alternatives to the Caro-Kann since they were bored playing against the exchange variation." Actually, that might have been Tim above, I think. Anyhow, he says, "I wanted to mention that the Scandinavian defense has structural similarities to the Caro-Kann. In particular, the Scandinavian often leads to positions with a half-open D-file and pawns on E6 or C6, similar to the Caro. Furthermore, the light-squared bishop often develops to F5, similar to the Caro-Kann. Of note, Jovanka Hauska is a well-known Caro-Kann player, but has also played the Scandinavian, and in fact has written books on both the Caro-Kann and Scandinavian. I highly recommend either of those books." So the Scandinavian, basically E4, D5, as an alternative to the Caro-Kann. Very interesting. So interesting comment there for those of you who are kind of getting bored with the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. Point 3. He says, regarding the question of how one's opponent is playing at master strength despite not being particularly high rated, "I have some games where I'm sure my opponent is wondering how I could be playing so strongly. One point of note, I see a lot of the same flawed variations played by many opponents. For example, when I play white against the Slav defense, my opponents often play bishop F5 too early. For example, D4, D5, C4, C6, knight F3, and now bishop F5. As a result of seeing this so many times, I have mapped out an increasing number of variations against this, and am getting to a point where I play much stronger against this flawed approach, even if I ultimately lose the game. In general, I am rarely surprised by my opponent's opening deviations these days. For example, as white, after I play 1 D4, I often see the England gambit with 1 E5. Rather than play into potential prep with D takes E5, I often play C3. Since black is often an aggressive player, they often play 2 E takes D4 when I have 2 choices. I can play 3 queen takes D4, reaching a reversed Scandinavian defense with an extra tempo. Alternatively, I can play 3 C takes D4, reaching a position comparable to a reversed Caro-Kann exchange variation after 3 D5. I find that the players who play the England gambit are often unable to handle these long-term positional struggles, especially if it leads to an endgame. Hope the above is helpful, and thanks so much for the awesome podcast." Well, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, Marty. Very, very interesting stuff. Thanks so much for taking the time to write in. Really appreciate it. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. So for our main topic this week, I want to talk about facing chess diehards, quote unquote, so-called chess diehards at over-the-board tournaments. This really isn't an online thing. This is really for over-the-board live rated tournaments, which is really what this pod is all about. And remember, what we talk about here we're always aiming for steady, realistic improvement for those of us balancing work and family and other things. But when you go to tournaments, you're going to run into a certain type of player sometimes that I'll call the chess diehard. They're normally very strong players. They're very devoted to the game. They can put in a lot more time to study and playing and prep than most of us can. I mean, you know the type. They've memorized, 20 moves of theory in every opening. They spend as much time with Stockfish as they do with other people. They spend almost every weekend playing in tournaments. And again, I'm not saying that in like I'm poking fun. I mean, I honor that dedication. I really do. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because when you start playing in tournaments, you are going to face that type of player. And the thing is, how do you beat that type of player? How do you compete with them? Because I know for me, for a long time, this was a big problem and I couldn't get out of my own way and I would sort of be lost before I even moved a piece. So anyway, again, the overwhelming majority of us, we're not in a situation where we can spend an inordinate amount of time prepping and studying. We do what we can, but these types of players, they can be beaten, but you have to make a little bit of a mindset shift. So much of this game is mental. It's like the psychological aspect of it is so important. It's definitely more important than the number of hours you study per week, because you could study all you want, but if your mindset, if your headspace is not in the right place, okay, if you're distracted or you're nervous or something, it's going to negate any of the work that you do. So let's start with a little bit of a reality check. All right. So again, we're talking about these players who are very talented, very dedicated. For whatever reason, they have an inordinate amount of time to spend on the game. You can compete with them. That's the whole point of this segment right now. You can compete with them, but we need to sort of adjust the narrative and the mindset. So the reality check. As a working adult with a family, you can't compete with their study hours and you shouldn't try to. You just need to accept that. It's just not going to happen. They're essentially sort of semi-professionals compared to our part-time hobbyist schedule. And so they differ greatly from the typical adult improver or adult amateur crowd. They give off a certain vibe at tournaments. I mean, this was an issue for me. I can only assume that maybe some of you dealt with this. When it's a player, for whatever reason, you can just sort of, maybe you know them, maybe you've played them before, or maybe you can just kind of tell. There is a vibe that they give off. It's very intimidating, and you're somehow intimidated, like right when you sit down at the board. And that can be difficult to deal with. That can throw off your whole game from the beginning. So when you face these types of players, let's talk about the mindset. As I just alluded to, don't let their intensity intimidate you, because I know that can be very unsettling and off-putting, but you need to look past that. Focus on playing your game. That's probably the most important point, or one of the most important points I'm going to make in this segment. Focus on playing your game. Sound openings, sound fundamentals, good time management, right? Play your game. And remember, even these diehards will blunder when they're tired, overconfident, or if they rely too deeply on their prep if you go in a different direction. They're not machines. They do make mistakes, as intimidating as they can be. And, maybe their rating is much higher than yours. Maybe they're moving very confidently. They do make mistakes. They're not machines. So you can beat them. But it goes back to that first point. You can't let their whole aura and intensity intimidate you. And when you first play in tournaments, that can be a major problem. It was for me. Next thing, you want to be practical. Stick to simple, solid opening systems that avoid their pet lines if you can. Remember, you want to have your own set opening repertoire. You want to stick with it, set it and forget it. Stick to the plan. You want to also emphasize practical chances over memorizing theory. In other words, play to your strengths and don't try to beat them at their own prep. Because if you sort of get sucked into the lines that they want to play or the direction they want to go, and I know it's easier said than done, but they will probably beat you. Practical chances, play to your own strengths, and make them play chess instead of just memorized lines. All right. If you can go in a different direction, and you're familiar with that, well, then they have to start thinking on their own. And as soon as you can get them out of prep, you're going to have a better chance. I mean, it doesn't always work out that way. And it's certainly risky because if you take it too far out of prep, you might be confused too. But very often you can sometimes beat these strong players that way. And the other thing, manage your time. Very, very important, time management. Many players in this situation, they'll beat the chess diehard because they're calmer and steadier in the longer games. In other words, don't get sucked into their fast play. I probably should have opened with that. In other words, with a lot of these chess diehards and these strong players, they tend to play very quickly. And that, again, that can be very unsettling, okay? Because you're thinking each move, right? You're thinking, and then bam, they whip out a move. I've spoken about this before, and then you're really, really thinking. And when they're whipping out moves, after maybe only 10 seconds thought, and you're taking a lot longer, that can really mess with your head because it's like, what am I playing so poorly that he's able to move that fast? Now, these chess diehards, they play quickly for two reasons, or it could be for two reasons. One is that they've studied so much, like maybe you're in a book line that they just know what it is. Okay, they know the theory, they've seen the positions, and so they just whip out the move real fast. But the second reason they do it, they know it's unsettling for you. Like they're trying to mess with you. So it's like a weekend time control, whatever, like 40 moves in 2 hours, and they're playing like it's a 10-minute blitz game. It's very unsettling, but you need to be calm and play your own game. Don't get sucked into that. Don't start playing fast as well, because that's what happens. They intimidate you with their fast play. You start to match them. You play the matching game. And because you're not taking the time to analyze the position, you end up blundering before they do. A couple of things to add to that as far as chess psychology. These chess diehards, they often tilt very hard because they tie so much of themselves to the results. And you should feel free to just kind of enjoy the game and fight. So in other words, you want to be fearless. Don't let them intimidate you, but practical. So fearless, but practical. And that will often unnerve them. In fact, that'll drive them crazy. When they see that their, quote unquote, weaker opponent, or their opponent who's not a chess diehard and who wasn't able to study for 20 hours that week, or who didn't play in a tournament every weekend, when you refuse to back down and you're playing good practical chess and they see you're not intimidated, that is going to drive the chess diehard bonkers, absolutely bonkers. Now, when I say they tilt hard, I think everybody know what tilting is. When you go on tilt, it comes from poker. It basically means, let's say you lost the game right before, and then you get frustrated, then you get in a mindset where you're in sort of catch up or revenge mode, and you're more concerned about just winning the game rather than playing good moves. Now, you can also tilt during a single game because let's say they think they're going to have an easy game and you're playing well, they start getting frustrated. Why am I not winning? And then they start to force things. All right. So when you go on tilt, it basically means that you lose your focused approach to the game and you start getting desperate and playing catch up. And the best way to get a chess diehard to tilt is just to play really well and play really practical and to play without fear. That's going to drive them crazy. Like, why is my opponent trying so hard to beat me? That type of thing, they almost expect you to bow down to them. Also, don't assume all their moves are sound. They do make mistakes, they blunder, and you need to jump on that. They're tough opponents, yes, but they're not unbeatable. And one of the reasons I'm such a huge fan and advocate for analyzing your games with an engine is because when you play this type of player, that's probably the most valuable lesson you're going to get. And what do I mean by that? I've had opponents that I've played, these chess diehards, where, I was so sure that they were being, really solid and I was worse. You put it in the engine, you'd be amazed how many mistakes they're making. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not quite as intimidated as I used to be, because by all accounts, like they'll be really confident, they'll have a high rating, they'll move kind of fast. But you put it in the engine, they're making all sorts of mistakes or inaccuracies. You'd be surprised. So again, don't assume every move they make is sound. Well, he did this, so it must be a good move. Like I said, when you have this type of game at a tournament, those are the games you have to put in the engine. Listen, I know not all of us, we're busy. Not every game you're going to analyze with an engine. I just know anecdotally that not everybody looks at every game. Some people even will go as far as to throw their score sheet out on the way out of the tournament hall if it was a tough loss because they're frustrated. I've done that myself. I mean, I keep score electronically now, so I can't throw anything out. But if you're not going to analyze all of your over-the-board tournament games with the computer, please do it against these players because that's where you're really going to learn. So just some long-term perspective. Let's just kind of take a breath and step back. Remember, steady, consistent improvement with a full life and work outside of chess is going to be more sustainable for us than trying to sort of force things. That's all we want is slow and steady improvement. Now, if you improve beyond that, if you have leaps and bounds in your rating, and that will happen, that's great. Look at it as gravy. But for most of us, the goal should be steady, consistent improvement because we have responsibilities outside of the game. And remember, many adult amateurs will eventually catch up to these diehards as far as rating because, they're being smarter and not just putting in longer hours. In other words, they're working smarter, not harder. So to wrap this up, what are the final takeaways from this? What can we learn from these chess diehards? Because remember, we do have to respect them. All right, they are good players. I actually like playing those types of players because it's a good test to see where you're at as far as your own progress and knowledge. So you have to respect their discipline. You do. You have to respect them. There's something to learn from all the hours they put in and try to steal some of that, like steal the principles of their approach, their consistency and their focus, but without the obsession, right? Steal that competitive approach, but again, without obsessing and having it take over your life. And you have to acknowledge, if you had their hours, you might play at the level 2. Not necessarily. I mean, many people study more hours and they don't see much improvement, but you have to acknowledge, if we had their hours, then yeah, you might be able to play at their level 2, but that's just how it is. And don't avoid tournaments because of these players. They're part of the landscape. Like someone wrote in about how some players at his club were avoiding tournaments because they didn't want to face the lower rated players who were playing really well, like a player rated 1,000 who was playing like 1,700. And they actually didn't show up to the club because they wanted to avoid those players. Well, they're part of the landscape, and so are these chess diehards. You're going to be facing players who are just really, really strong. It's going to feel like you're playing a computer. And you're going to be facing players who are quote unquote lower rated, but who also play really, really strong. I mean, that's just how it is. Of course, none of us want to play those types of players, but they're part of the scene and you can't avoid it. And that shouldn't be a reason to not get involved in tournaments. And last thing I'll say, and this is something I mentioned at least 2 or 3 times in this episode, facing these players is what you want. You want to play these strong chess diehards because facing them can sharpen your game. Even if you win or lose, you're going to get a lesson from that you can study and analyze. And over time, that will help you improve. So don't look at it as, oh, this is going to be a tough game. How can I beat this guy? You have to look at it as win or lose. I'm going to be a stronger chess player as a result of facing these chess diehards. So just some things I wanted to share. And you'll notice a lot of this was really psychological and mindset things. Again, not letting their intensity intimidate you, understanding that they tilt very easily, and when they do, they tilt really hard. These players can be beat, and as I said earlier, you have to get out of your own way. You can't sort of let them get into your head, because if you let them mess with your head from move 1, it's going to be very, very tough to play a good game. Really appreciate you listening, and as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.